to the Center for Women's History. Center for Colorado Women's History down in Denver, and it's a subsidiary of History Colorado. And we wanted to do the tour of the museum. And this woman, Ella, was there and gave us this amazing tour. And she just had everything in her head and on the tip of her tongue about all of these amazing women that really defined Colorado. And I was so impressed with her that I asked if she would come up and speak, and she said she could. She was working there at the time, has transitioned into another role, so I'll let her tell you about that. But I hope that you are as impressed with her as I was. She just has so much wonderful history to share. So help me welcome Ella Rupp.
Thank you, Candace, for attending my tour that day and for Trailblazers for having me. And thank you so much for you all being here tonight. My name is Ella Rupp, and I am currently a graduate student at the University of Denver. I am enrolled in their Anthropology and Museum and Heritage Studies program. I also intern out at the Molly Brown House Museum. I'm a collections intern there, so I do a lot of the cleaning and dusting and look at the bugs. So definitely the less glamorous part of being in museums, but I really like it there and kind of continuing on my enjoyment of women's history. And then I also do work at DU's Anthropology Museum, and I primarily have a research role there. For my graduate thesis, if any of you have been through grad school, you know that's a really big component of it. I am researching the acquisition and display of sexual health materials in history museums and heritage sites alongside female representation. And then for my role at the Center for Colorado Women's History, I was a former AmeriCorps member, and I also interned there. So this was about a year-long stay there. My experience at the institution and the content we developed there served as my inspiration for the women I discuss in this presentation, Tough Women, Colorado's Unconventional Trailblazers. Thank you. Okay. So the Center for Colorado Women's History is a museum that features historic women's accomplishments, lifestyles, and communities throughout Colorado. Located in the former Byers-Evans House, the Victorian architecture provides an engaging backdrop for these stories to be told. However, the museum is also aiming to reshape the space by dedicating it to the often untold historic significance of women instead of relaying the Byers and Evans legacy. Both the Byers and Evans families have controversial reputations in Colorado. William Byers wrote articles advocating for the genocide of the Ute during his tenure at the Rocky Mountain News, and John Evans was a perpetrator of the Sand Creek Massacre. While John Evans did not own the home, his son William Evans did, and he was an unethical and union-busting businessman. We had a part on the tour that some kind of locals knew about, or if you got the right guide that day, they would relay this to you. But on the first floor at the Center for Colorado Women's History, there is a window, like a bay window. It was formerly William Evans' office. It was turned into a music room because he discovered that having his office right next to a door with his last name on it and being an unpopular boss was not such a great setup, because there was an attempted assassination and the bullet hole still remains in that glass to this day. So yes, he was not popular. It has in turn been a process for the Center for Colorado Women's History. Sorry, I'm not going off my slides here to make sure I fit this for you all. Oh, okay. Perfect. Oh, necessities of its location and shift its focus to the contributions of women within Colorado. This mission was initially inspired by the former female residents of the home. These women included notable Denver social reformer Elizabeth Byers, World War I Red Cross volunteer Cornelia Gray Evans, and arts patron Ann Evans. You might recognize Ann Evans from a few different locations in Denver. She was one of the founders of the Denver Art Museum, which was previously the Denver Artists Club. She was also an artist, but I've heard mixed reviews on her work. I personally liked it. And she also helped design Civic Center Park, so she was pretty notable in the region. But something that's kind of in the know for folks who worked at Center for Colorado Women's History was kind of the taboo of her sexuality. She was one of those women who kind of had a lifelong friend and roommate. And after she passed away, it was actually uncovered that they wrote a bunch of love letters between her and this other woman who was kind of her, at the time, believed platonic lifelong companion. And that's a personal favorite story of mine for when I would give tours there. And so broadening the lens outside of these residents allows us to tell diverse and overlooked stories, and to empower women and femmes to feel pride in contributions women made to the state. An example of this updated storytelling that I'm discussing can be seen in this photo. This is an image of the now former exhibit Miss Destiny. Miss Destiny highlighted 7 different women throughout the state who made significant historical contributions and broke the mold of the female archetype for their respective time period. This snapshot centers a Union soldier's uniform used to represent the only known female Buffalo soldier, Cathay Williams. Cathay Williams has unique ties to Colorado, as after her service in the Indian Wars, she resided in Trinidad and Pueblo. Not too much is known about her life, but recently we have uncovered some hospitalization documents about her from her time at the Pueblo Hospital. And while Cathay is certainly a fantastic woman, I picked a few specific women to discuss tonight for you all. And each of the women I discuss, I have the privilege of learning about at this museum. And I am honored now to share their stories with you. When we visualize the laborious trek westward, the image of tenacious Anglo pioneers comes to mind. I believe this lithograph embodies that visual well, as it exemplifies the bleak, difficult, and isolating terrain with its ominous gray hues and distant horizons. Popular culture often tells the story of the nuclear family and a covered wagon staving off disease. Or, on the other hand, a rowdy group of bearded prospectors hoping to strike it rich in the Colorado Rockies. Clara Brown was none of these common tropes and made the journey as a single Black woman. Clara Brown was born enslaved around 1800 in Virginia and lived throughout the South as she was non-consensually bought and sold in auction numerous times. This experience was deeply traumatic for Clara, and that was compounded during an auction when she was separated from her husband and 4 children. Clara's period of enslavement ended in 1859, but the relief of freedom was dampened by Clara having limited economic opportunities and reeling from the loss of her family. When Clara heard a whisper that her daughter Eliza had moved westward, she jumped at the opportunity to reunite with her. The gold rush lasted from 1858 to 1861, And during that time, the Colorado Territory saw the largest mass migration to the region. In 1859, Clara Brown was many who began the pilgrimage west. Yet she faced numerous barriers. Clara was unable to purchase a stagecoach ticket because she was Black. So instead, she convinced a band of prospectors to allow her to join their party under the condition that she was their cook. Clara's traveling companions' lust for gold brought her to Colorado's Central City, and after unsuccessfully locating her daughter, she called the Untamed Mountains home. This, in turn, made her one of the first, if not the first, Black woman to travel westward and reside in the mining towns of the Rockies.
Wow.
Clara established the city's first laundry, and it became prosperous because of the constant dirty garments from miners and travelers. By 1865, the laundry had already amassed her $10,000. So this is around $200,000 by today's estimates. But I did this conversion a year ago, so we all know it is more. Clara was smart with her finances and reinvested her earnings into mines and real estate, growing her fortune. Clara was also exceedingly generous and became a pillar of the Central City community. She invested the money in essential infrastructure in the town that would financially support those who needed assistance. She even provided medical expertise by aiding the sick and practicing midwifery. Clara Brown additionally assisted bringing recently freed folks westward and financially supported budding Black communities. Clara Brown accomplished the fortune and stability that was the fantasy of every pioneer traveling towards the high peaks of Colorado. She persisted through the limitations constructed based on her race and gender, even eventually reuniting with her daughter Eliza, a mere 3 years before her death in 1885. While the image I previously presented of Clara is the only known portrait of her, this is a gorgeous sculpture of her at the Smithsonian National Museum of African American History and Culture. So she's honored all the way over in Washington, D.C. The population boom in Colorado, spurred by those moving westward, such as Clara Brown, encouraged the scaffolding for an eventual state government, with new citizens advocating for legislation that would shape the region. Women who embarked west were mesmerized by the promise of freedom, and this desire culminated in the suffrage movement gaining momentum in the state by 1876. Suffrage organizations in Colorado were predominantly run by upper-class white women who did not find it acceptable to have Black women join their ranks. However, the involvement of Elizabeth Piper Ensley in the Denver movement created a safe space for Black women in advocacy work. Elizabeth, born in Massachusetts in 1847, was a highly educated and well-traveled daughter of formerly enslaved parents. Elizabeth had the rare opportunity in this era to receive schooling at a young age, and most impressively, as she entered her 20s, she even pursued academic studies abroad in Switzerland and Germany. After her remarkable time in Europe, she settled in Boston and began her passion for education and public advocacy by helping implement a library and teaching at Howard University in Washington, D.C. Elizabeth Piper Ensley moved to Denver with her husband and family in 1887. Sadly, her livelihood would shift in the city. As her husband died, bringing Elizabeth into single motherhood. The social stigma and lack of resources as both a single mother and a widow left Elizabeth disadvantaged, but her unrelenting passion for education pulled her into the suffrage movement in Denver. Here is one of the many political cartoons that was published during this time, and I chose this one because it was a positive one, and there was not many of those. Elizabeth joined the Colorado Equal Suffrage Association and continued her activism by writing for the National Association of Colored Women. To strengthen the cause in Denver, Elizabeth founded the Association of Colored Women's Clubs, an effort to unite various independent organizations. Elizabeth predominantly still spent her time in Black-run suffrage organizations because of the racism within the movement. But the decision to make her a treasurer of the all-white Colorado Federation of Women's Clubs changed the landscape in the state. This, in turn, encouraged other predominantly white suffrage groups to allow Black women into their ranks, which strengthened alliances within the cause. The image being presented here is a photograph of the constitution of the previously mentioned Colorado Equal Suffrage Association. At the bottom on the left side of the document, it reads Mrs. E. Ensley, 1755 Ogden Street, being listed as the treasurer. Elizabeth Piper Ensley passed away at the age of 72 in 1919 while living in Arvada. This is actually an image of Colorado women voting. I believe this may be the first election they were allowed to vote in 1893. Or sorry, excuse me, it would have been 1894, so the year after. Women like Elizabeth Piper Ensley proved how crucial multiracial involvement was in the suffrage movement, as Black women were able to campaign within their communities, bolstering support from Black men. This was crucial, considering it was all men eligible to vote in Colorado, which included Black men, who made it the first state to grant women the right to vote by popular referendum. And that would be in 1893. And I am aware that Wyoming likes to take the title, but I am biased, and I believe it's Colorado because, first of all, we were officially a state. During this time, Wyoming passed it when they were still a territory. And as I said, we were the first to pass it via popular referendum. So that means that we had enough people out here to turn out to vote, to say that women had the right to vote in the state. So I'm really proud of our state for that. Female activism is primarily attributed to the suffrage movement in the second half of the 19th century through the early 20th century. Irish-born Mary Harris Jones, better known as Mother Jones, subverts this popular ideation. In fact, she was actually not a proponent of the suffrage movement. She believed that women were powerful enough that they did not need the vote to prompt political change. As I clarify, Mother Jones' opinion on the suffrage movement does conflict with her reputation and legacy, being that of a single woman who rallied industrial and mine workers to advocate for better work conditions. So Mother Jones' path did not cross with the labor movement until later in life. She was actually born in Ireland in 1837, and her family immigrated to Toronto, Canada in the wake of the potato famine. In her adult life, Mother Jones traveled throughout the Midwest United States, working as a teacher. But her life was permanently altered when she lost her entire family to yellow fever and many of her possessions in the Great Chicago Fire. After these devastating losses, she filled her time with labor rights activism. And she was a good candidate for that because she had a newfound detachment to a certain location or home base, which in turn allowed her to travel nationwide to support the cause. This image is a particular engaging one and one of my personal favorites of Mother Jones. It exemplifies her hands-on activism as she marches in protest for mine workers' rights in Trinidad, Colorado. I also saw in a few of my sources that she did wear black garments for the rest of her life in mourning for her family. By the 1890s, Mother Jones had strongly aligned herself with the interests of the United Mine Workers. She dedicated her time to making extensive travels to company towns and mining camps, rallying the momentum for strikes, protests, and calls for unionization. These efforts garnered Mother Jones the title of the most dangerous woman in America, coined by a West Virginia district attorney. The danger that followed Mother Jones was present when she set foot into the agitated coal camps of Colorado. Her activist work in the state led to a historic moment in her life and the state of Colorado. This moment was the Ludlow Massacre. During her time assisting a camp in Ludlow, managed by Rockefeller's Colorado Fuel and Iron Company, tragedy struck. After the steady rise of tensions at Ludlow, it finally boiled over when the Colorado National Guard and Fuel and Iron Company guards opened fire on the camp in attempts to quell minor uprisings. 21 people, including 11 children, were killed by the gunfire. To this day, this is actually still the largest massacre in the state. The Ludlow Massacre rightfully sparked a turning point in labor negotiations. And Mother Jones, in particular, really leveraged the fallout of this event, and she had the chance to speak with John D. Rockefeller Jr. And with this, the steps towards reforms began. So as we can see, corporate and political mining interests were valid in fearing Mother Jones. Even when she had an incarceration stint in 1884, she continued to advocate from jail, proving that she was truly a force to be reckoned with. This image here is an artifact of a badge. This is from the 10th Annual United Mine Workers Convention. This was held in Louisville, Colorado in 1913. The circular photo is of Mother Jones and honors her as a delegate. In 1930, Mother Jones passed away at the age of 93 and is buried in Illinois. In 1896, another scrappy Colorado woman crossed the picket line of a miners' strike, this time in Leadville. With $25,000 hidden in her bustle to help compensate the strikers' lost wages, famed Mountain Madame Laura Evans made her alliance clear. Evans' overt support for the miners affected her position as a sex worker, with clientele foregoing her services in Leadville. To embark on new economic beginnings, Evans relocated to Salida, opening the door for independent entrepreneurship when she purchased her own brothel. Before her mountain escapade, escapades and adventures that would go down in Colorado history, Laura Evans was born Alice Chapel Reed in This image here is actually taken within her Salida brothel. I believe she's perhaps a woman in the back, but this kind of gives you an idea of really how decked out everything was. They look fabulous. Laura Evans had learned the ropes of sex work shortly after her move to Denver from the South in 1892, and she did enter the career consensually. Her prior experience allowed her brothel to rapidly gain success. Not only was her brothel known for its beautiful women, as many said, the most beautiful women in the area, but her fierce nature and protection of the women who worked for her resulted in a prosperous operation. Here's a fun picture. Laura Evans, similar to Clara Brown, began to give back to the community as she amassed her noticeable fortune. She balanced wearing extravagant fur coats with providing food, household supplies, and even paying for college tuition for residents. Evans' philanthropy in Salida was also non-monetary, famously allowing her parlor girls to serve as nurses for those inflicted by Spanish flu in the community. This did not go over well with the local church, who was aiding in that mission as well. Laura's financial accomplishments, such as being an independent female car owner, an attribute nearly unheard of at the time, are overshadowed by her salacious image. This is my personal favorite image on the slide, if any of you love dogs. Not only did Laura wrestle with the taboo of sex work, but she did not conform to the expectation of mother and homemaker. Her daughter would later criticize Laura for the lack of presence in her life, adding personal nuance to her already controversial public opinion. Remarkably, Laura Evans ran her brothel in Salida until 1950. She still remained financially stable, though, after it shut down by renting those same rooms to railway workers. And she passed away in 1953 at the age of 82. This image of Laura, as I said, is one of my personal favorites. She is known to be like a notorious animal lover. The absolute love of her life was a Chihuahua. His name was actually Mr. Pimp Powers. That was his full name, given to her by one of her fellow sex workers. She even had goats and chickens in her yard, and some images documenting her fellow parlor girls even show them riding a donkey on her property. And I'm going to go on a little bit of a tangent because I briefly discussed that my graduate thesis at the University of Denver is about sexual health materials in museums, which are quite uncommon. And I really do have to credit Laura Evans for actually inspiring my thesis. So as you can see, there are a lot of photos of her, and they were primarily taken by a famous Colorado photographer named Fred Missoula. I don't know if any of you all are familiar with him, but if something disastrous or bizarre or strange or scandalous happened, he would be there taking photos of it. And so as you can see, he liked the sex workers, he liked kind of the more taboo sides of life, and originally just his subject, him and Laura became wonderful friends. And when Laura passed away, she gave Fred Missoula a lot of what she owned. I want to say everything because one of the things she owned that she gave Fred was her diaphragm. And this diaphragm is still around. It is in quite a few pieces. It is made of yeah, 1930s, so quite the relic. And as I put it in the display case, I wondered how many more of these were around. And so because of this really unique story, so yeah, I should back up. Fred then passed away, and his entire photography collection went to History of Colorado. And in that box was Laura's diaphragm. So they had to figure out what the situation was with that. And so then, as a 22-year-old and a 23-year-old, I was very intrigued by this. And when my professors at DU asked me what I wanted my thesis to be, I immediately thought of this. And it is still my thesis proposal, which I'm presenting in about 6 weeks. So, so thank you, Laura, for helping me get through graduate school. Okay, so getting back on track now. Two women who also knew the influence of both public and private opinion were Clara Dietrich and Ora Chatfield, similarly living a life of sexual scandal in the Colorado Rockies, this time in the small town of Basalt. Ora Chatfield, this is a lovely portrait of her, was born in 1873, and her family moved around between Arapahoe and Gunnison counties. Ora's family was known in the region due to her father being the brother of politician Isaac Willard Chatfield, who helped develop Littleton, if that last name rings a bell to any of you. So eyes were certainly already on the notable Chatfield family. Okay. So Clara Dietrich was born in 1863 in Iowa, but grew up in Emma, Colorado, which is now more commonly known as Basalt, alongside Ora Chatfield. Clara became a postmistress and storekeeper in the area. The two women were actually cousins and came of age in the latter half of the 1800s and brought shock and shame to their families when emotional love letters between the two were uncovered. Now bear with me here because we need to remember this era. The family was not enraged due to their familial relation or age differences, occurrences that were generally more accepted during this era, but the fact that the two were engaged in a lesbian relationship, that was really the sticking point. So when they discovered their family's motivations to separate them, Ora and Clara, who were only 16 and 24 at the time, fled to Denver and eloped. Rumor is this was sped up because Clara had a prospective lover in Aspen, and she wanted to get away from the area and be with Ora. So local gossip and Colorado publications alike began reporting on this sensational story, with police then stepping in and returning the women to their families. So this separation was initiated, as I said, both by law enforcement and their respective families. And the women were also threatened to undergo experimental sanity testing if they did not abide by these measures. So a little bit of a downer to the story. Ora and Clara eventually married men, had families, and left Colorado. But their story remains to be an early insight into the perils of queer identity in Colorado. This image, I picked it because I feel like it captures the sentiment of queer identity and queer protest here in Colorado. These citizens are from Colorado, but actually traveled to Washington, D.C. in 1993 to protest the passage of Amendment 2. Now, Amendment 2 was passed in 1992 and removed protections for people based on their sexual orientations. And Colorado voters during this time actually approved Amendment 2 by a small margin of 53%. As we conclude with the lecture and slides portion of tonight's talk, I thought it would be fun to kind of let you all know where you can further visually engage with the history of the women I discussed here in Colorado. So a beautiful stained glass portrait of Clara Brown can be viewed in the old Supreme Court chamber at the Colorado State Capitol. There is also a memorial chair in her honor at the Central City Opera House. For all of you historic cemetery goers, Clara Brown is buried in Denver's historic Riverside Cemetery, along with Elizabeth Piper Emsley. And while not designated as a local landmark, and even after significant alterations, I saw that it was briefly a hotel, Laura Evans' former brothel can still be viewed at 129 West Sackett Avenue in Salida. So I think, kind of concluding all of this, it's important to consider as history enthusiasts and museum goers that there are powerful and intersectional female stories at many locations, even if it is not overtly expressed to us. And many of these lives and stories have been unfortunately lost to time. Even in the research for this presentation, we're limited on images, and a lot of Laura and Clara's stories were told through their personal family genealogists. And as a prospective museum professional, I aim to do what I can to uplift information about women that was preserved and continue to engage with female voices in hopes of educating museum visitors of the future. And as you leave tonight, I would implore you all to think about what resonated with you about these women. What is unique about their stories? Do they reframe previous ideas about Colorado history? And do attributes of these women remind you of women close to you in your life? And I would like to thank you all for attending and just for this opportunity. So I would like to now open the floor to questions.
Okay, so 2 questions. So Clara was able to reunite with her daughter, but not the rest of her family.
That is unfortunately correct. I am not completely sure where her husband ended up, but 2 of her children died quite young. And then another one passed away a little bit later in life before Clara could reconnect with them. If I remember correctly, it was 2 sons and 2 daughters, and there was the one remaining daughter, Eliza, that she got back in contact with.
Okay. And then who killed all the miners in Ludlow?
So that was a combination of both Colorado law, I think it was actually, no, federal law enforcement. No, Colorado? I think it was Colorado and John D. Rockefeller. It was a combination of guards that were specifically hired to be working in the camp, and then those brought in by governmental powers.
Okay, and where is that museum in Denver?
Yeah, that is a great question. So it is actually right next to the Denver Art Museum. If you actually look over the bridge of the Denver Art Museum, you can see it. It is on Bank Street in the Golden Triangle neighborhood.
And that's the Byron Evans?
Yes, so that is the former Byers Evans house.
Okay.
Yes.
So, Clara Brown just kind of seems like super cool to me. I'm wondering if you ever read any accounts in your research where her safety was threatened, because it just seems like kind of a crazy thing that just happened outwardly. And
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and I kind of have like a twofold answer. If you're talking more specifically about the travel to Colorado, she was certainly at risk. She was made to walk alongside the wagon, as she could actually not ride in it because of her race. So that already, as we all know, puts a pretty significant physical health risk on Clara, in addition to the prejudices occurring during the time. The walking next to the wagon segment of her story is what I primarily saw as one of the more noticeable hardships during that travel. But as I was kind of discussing in the conclusion of my research, the unfortunate thing about female stories, especially women of color, is it can be hard to find that documentation of their life and find conclusively accurate documentation. In terms of her life in Central City, I, in my research, did not find any instance where she was personally endangered, but I believe that likely did occur. Thank you. Yes?
What's the most interesting to you artifact that you're writing about here?
That's a great question. I cold called over 30 museums in our state, being like, do you have sexual health materials by any chance? I actually got some really wonderful responses from everyone, and it makes me very happy about the future of this field and how we're really diversifying. And two of my personal favorites come from the Greeley History Museum, and that is an ovulation tracker from the 1930s. And another one is in the Los Animas Museum, way in southern Colorado, and those are pennyroyal pills. They were used as contraceptives and to induce abortions during that time, so certainly an outdated technology. And the collections manager was actually telling me that when she was managing a few of the assistants there, they didn't know what it was. So I think that's also particularly interesting, kind of sharing that information more. So thank you for the fun question. Yes?
Hey, Al, great presentation, great job. Wanted to ask you about the only woman buffalo soldier. What was her name?
Yeah, thank you. Her name was Cathay Williams. Cathay. It's Cathay. There are also variations of her spelling on numerous documents and books and monuments. Another part of a lot of women of color histories being a little bit unclear and kind of muddy. But yeah, she was kind of left with a difficult decision after being emancipated of either going into sharecropping, going into low-wage work, or finding another avenue. And she was quite tall for the time. I think she was about 5'10", and so especially in the mid-1800s, that is significantly tall for anybody. And she was able to successfully wear men's clothing and pass the medical inspection to get into the Army. And I believe she served for about 2 years in the Indian Wars. Her role was primarily non-combative. It was a lot of trekking across the United States with her group. And as I said with Clara Brown, it takes a pretty significant toll on your body and your physical health. And it was actually her physical health complications is what caused her to leave the military. And during kind of her time traveling, it brought her westward. I've also heard from other sources that she had some connections here in the southern Colorado, Pueblo, and Trinidad area, and that's how she made her way out here. What she was with, gosh, it's been a while. It was with, I believe, like the regiment that was the Buffalo Soldiers, if anybody actually remembers the number. Okay, the 15th and 17th, okay. Yeah, it's been, as Candace explained, over a year since I've given this tour regularly, so I'm trying my very best to kind of remember things off the top of my head, so thank you.
Yeah, great job.